The House Chairman of the Budget Committee, Paul Ryan, is with us. He wanted to talk about the deal that's been negotiated with Patty Murray. Congressman, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you doing, Great One?
I'm doing great. Before we get started, Obama put out a statement. I don't know how he puts out a statement so fast. But he says this agreement replaces a portion of the across-the-board spending cuts known as the sequester that have harmed students, seniors, all that.
Yeah.
Clears the path for critical investments. Is he saying that we're spending more than we would have, that we renegotiated this sequester?
So we're taking the sequester and taking $63 billion over 2 years and adding it back to the sequester, and we're cutting $85 billion to pay for it from the part of government that's not affected by the sequester. We call it entitlement spending or mandatory spending. The sequester hits what we call discretionary spending, government agency budgets. Half of that is defense. It doesn't affect what we call autopilot spending, the stuff that Congress doesn't deal with on an annual basis. And so we're basically switching the cuts, some of the cuts from the sequester, over to another area of government that we haven't addressed for many years. And so what I like about this agreement is I'm getting permanent law changes, permanent spending cuts to pay for a one-time relief from the sequester. In particular, we have members who are really worried about the cuts to the Defense Department, the military. The rest of the sequester hits nothing but the military starting in January, and this prevents that from happening and cuts spending in other areas. The result for me needed to be, if I did nothing, what would happen versus doing this? Doing this cuts the deficit about $23 billion. All
right, let me stop you there, because this can get complicated.
I'm sorry, I can get a little weedy myself.
No, it's all right. I'm just a pedestrian, but let me follow this. But the spending increases are immediate.
That's right.
And the spending reductions that you say will happen
over time.
Over time, so we may never see them.
No, that's not true. So this is unfortunately the nature of what we call mandatory spending. For instance, I'm saying right away, federal employees are going to have to pay, new federal employees are going to have to pay more for some of their pensions. That law changes now, but over time it accumulates a lot of savings. Later on it accumulates even more than we're accounting for.
But are they really paying for their pensions, or is that money being used as a bookkeeping thing to spend for operating expenses?
It's not like what the states do. The concern we have had is the taxpayers are subsidizing more of a public employee's pension than, say, the private sector does. And so we're saying more has to come out of the person's paycheck to go to their pension, so that less has to come from the taxpayer.
And how do we know it'll go to their pension and not be spent on some operating expense?
No, it doesn't. It goes toward their pensions. It goes to the Civil Service Retirement Trust Fund. For example, there's an energy and development program that has taxpayer dollars paying for private research and development for energy companies. Now, we're getting rid of that program. But getting rid of that program permanently saves us more money over time. Getting rid of it just 1 year or cutting it 1 year, that gives me a little bit of money, but getting rid of it entirely saves me a lot of money, but it takes time to save all of that money. That's the nature of changing entitlement laws. It takes a while to accumulate the savings, but it never stops because it's permanent law, permanent savings.
Well, no, let me say that.
Yes, there's temporary increase, mostly to stop the Pentagon from getting hit again, but we're still keeping the sequester. We're not.
But hold on now, that's not what Obama says. Obama says, no, this spending will help students, seniors, middle class, domestic spending.
And I think he's going to say that because he likes the domestic side of it. We don't like cutting the military. So in the give and take, in finding common ground, money is being added back to the sequester, not just to help the military, but also to go back toward domestic spending. Now, here's what I've been minding, namely our principles. I don't want any tax increases, so there are no tax increases in here. They wanted stimulus spending, none of that's in here. They wanted unemployment extension, that's not in here. They also wanted $1.058 trillion. We're at $1.012 trillion. We are lower than halfway between the two of our positions.
But the congressman, they want it out of the sequester, and they're out of the sequester.
No, they're not out of the sequester. That's the plan.
Part of it.
They're not a part of it, but we still keep the caps in place. We still keep the sequester, and we set it at a level where the military doesn't get cut anymore. Let me say it this way. 2 years ago, when I was trying to pass a budget, where I passed it through the House, our budget did a lot of things. It did Medicare reform, tax reform. It balanced the budget. It pays off the debt. It called for spending $1.019 trillion in what we call discretionary spending. Under this agreement, we wouldn't hit that number until the year 2017. So the number I was fighting for 2 years ago, I won't even hit until 2017. So we see that we're ahead of schedule, and we're moving some of the spending cuts from the Pentagon and from discretionary spending over to what we call entitlement or mandatory spending.
But you're having revenue increases, right?
No, we don't have tax
not just on
increases.
pension. I didn't say tax increases. You have revenue increases, and not just on federal employees and their pensions, right?
Yeah, that's right.
What are your revenue increases?
So we have user fees, which that were in my budget before, that we've agreed to in the past, which is a person who uses the service from the government should pay for that service instead of having a taxpayer subsidize what they use. For example, if you make a person pay more for their pension, yes, that is recorded as a fee, but it also means that the taxpayer doesn't pay as much for their pension.
What else other than the pension?
Airlines. If you get on a plane and if you have a connecting flight from point A to point B, you pay $5 fee for your security. If you do not have a connecting flight, you pay $2.50. But you don't go through security twice when you have a connecting flight. So we just equalize that at $5. The reason we did that is because before 9/11, everybody who flied on an airplane paid for their own security. In their ticket was all the money to pay for airport security. Since 9/11, the flying public only pays for 40% of their security, and the non-flying taxpayer pays for 60% of their security.
Mm-hmm.
Under this agreement, the flying public, the people getting on the airplane, will pay for 60% of their security instead of 40%.
Can I give you my impression on this, what
Sure.
you're telling me here? This is really Mickey Mouse. I don't mean to be offensive. I just want to... You're claiming...
oversell this.
Hold on, you're claiming a $23 billion savings. I'm reading what you said here to somebody.
That's right, deficit reduction.
On the deficit, and you're increasing spending by what? The same amount in the immediate in the next 2 years?
We save $85 billion, and we gives back to the sequester $63 billion.
Okay, so the bottom line is we have a $90 trillion unfunded liability. Let me just say for the public, we have a $90 trillion unfunded liability that goes up by about $7 trillion a year. We have a $17.3 trillion fiscal operating debt. And the Democrats wouldn't let you really address that, would they?
That's right. So I think it's a little higher than $90 trillion, but I'll give you that number.
It'll be 100 in about a month.
Exactly. So, look, I am not suggesting that with Barack Obama we are going to fix this country's fiscal problems. I really do not believe he is willing and able to do that. But what I do think is in our interest is not shutting the government down and bringing and distracting the country away from what we want to focus on. Things like Obamacare, things like IRS, things like we want to talk about. That's point number one. So we don't think a government shutdown helps.
But I'm focused on Obamacare, so what are they going to do about it?
Well,
Nothing.
This agreement prevents a government shutdown in January and prevents a government shutdown in October.
You guys are all worked up about that. Lots of us don't really care about that.
We think it puts us in a good position. More to the point, we also want to reclaim the power of the purse. For 3 years, we have given the president what we call a continuing resolution. That means he sets the priorities on spending, not Congress, not the legislative branch. By having an agreement like this, you not only stop a government shutdown, you get Congress to reclaim the power of the purse so that we set priorities. I'm fighting for a conscience clause rider on appropriations because I'm very worried about religious freedom. I can't do that if we have a continuing resolution. I can do that if Congress is put back in charge of appropriations, which we are because of this kind of a budget agreement. So to me, I'm advancing my principles by reducing the deficit without raising taxes, by reclaiming the power of the purse for Congress and not delegating it to the executive branch.
That's too late.
Well, we can go on and on about that.
What happened?
We need to reclaim some of our power here.
Well, what happened to the 2011 deal that increased the debt limit? The sequester was supposed to be in place,
right.
And now we're adjusting it.
And so this actually reduces the deficit by $23 billion farther
over 10 years.
Sure, but by that deal.
Ain't going to happen.
That Budget Control Act, by the way, is a result of this. That's how the sequester got where it is. And the sequester has dropped spending. And what we're saying, particularly because a lot of our members are really worried about further cuts to the military, we're going to add back in this fiscal year and the next one. That's about a year and a half. We're going to give some money back with $63 billion in the next year and a half and save $85 billion so we have more deficit. Now, these numbers aren't that big, and that's the problem. These numbers aren't big enough to balance the budget, to pay off the debt. That's what my budget does. It pays the debt off and balances the budget.
Right, let me slow you down a second.
Say that again.
Let me slow you down a second.
Sure.
It can't do both. It can't cut spending and increase spending at the same time, right?
No, your cuts can be bigger than your increases, so that your net is deficit reduction.
No, you're cutting over a longer period of time, $23 billion over 10 years, which is what? $2.3 billion a year over 10 years. And the spending part comes at the front end, pretty much, right?
Let me get you there. We're keeping the sequester. That's the point I'm trying to make. We're keeping on track with
some of the sequester.
No, we're keeping the sequester in 2014, in 2015, in 2016, in 2017, on and on and on. And in 2014 and 15, we are bringing the sequester number up by $63 billion over those 2 years, and then we're cutting other areas of government spending to pay for that, in addition to extra deficit reduction. But we're keeping the spending caps where they are so that we keep those savings in the out years.
Congressman, I've just been around a long time. I don't see, you say it's going to be the law, $23 billion, that's your big net. $23 billion over 10 years. First of all, I don't believe it. Not because I don't believe you. I don't believe it. Well, that's number one.
Yeah.
Number two, we're facing a fiscal disaster in this country. I know you know this. You've told me this. Hold on. I just want to get my question out. A fiscal disaster in this country, and we're talking about $23 billion over 10 years. Go ahead.
I'm not suggesting this fixes our problems. What I'm suggesting is I like the precedent that's being set. The Democrats in every budget negotiation said, I need half tax increases, half spending. We're saying all spending, no tax increases. We got that precedent established. Every time there's fiscal pressure, according to this precedent, we go after spending and we get more spending cuts so that we get more deficit reduction. I like the precedent that's being set here because we're not going back to the taxpayer. This isn't even close to what we need to do to finish the job, to fix our fiscal problems. That's what our budget does. I cut $4.6 trillion in the budget I passed in March. That's what we want to do.
Everybody's cutting a fortune, but the debt goes up to $17.3 trillion in the next few months. It's almost $100 trillion unfunded liabilities. Where the hell are all these cuts?
Hey, Mark, elections have consequences. If we would have won the election, we would have put in place our budget.
Yeah, I remember the election where we had a Republican president, Republican Senate, Republican House, and it was the most profligate spending in American history before this guy became president.
Why do you think I put these roadmap budgets out there at the end of the Bush administration in protest to the spending that was going on at that time? So people like me were fighting for these spending cuts all along. The question for me is not what is the world that I want to be, what is the world we're in? And the world we're in is the left runs the Senate and the White House, and we have the House. Can I get a step in the right direction even if I can't go a mile in the right direction? And a step in the right direction for me, and for my caucus, by the way, don't keep taking it out of the hide of the military. Make sure that we don't raise taxes, and make sure that when we have fiscal pressure, we say you've got to go after entitlement spending.
But you're increasing spending.
Even if it's $23 billion, right. We think that's $23 billion
Hold on now.
To the right way.
To be correct about this, from my perspective, you're increasing spending immediately, and you're saying we're going to have $23 billion in net decrease over 10 years. Right?
That's right. That's right.
Play poker. I play it a lot.
And by the way, those savings grow even beyond that. So because we're changing the law.
Well, they have to. You know why? Because you're increasing spending in the immediate term, so you're going to have bigger cuts in the out years because your debt's going to be bigger and bigger and bigger.
The point I'm trying to make is these are permanent spending cuts, not temporary spending increases.
With all due respect,
permanent spending cuts for temporary spending increases.
Nothing's permanent. That 2011 deal on the debt ceiling, that was permanent, and it's not permanent.
Actually, it wasn't permanent because it didn't change entitlements. It didn't change the entitlement law. We are changing entitlement law.
You say the sequester's still in place, right? But you've adjusted it so you can increase,
right.
Not you, but they can. The liberals want to spend, and so they want to increase spending in the short term, and they're willing to cut a deal that where you say we're going to cut the debt $23 billion over 10 years. Do I have her about right, Patty Murray?
No, I'm Paul Ryan.
No, but do I have Patty Murray about right?
I'm kidding. Yeah, I'm just messing with you. Look, people will measure this.
No, just kidding.
No, I get you. People will measure this against, I guess, what they see as the perfect, which is just stick with the sequester as it is. Here's the problem. We have too many of our members.
Can I stop you a second? I didn't negotiate the perfect. You guys did.
Well,
I'm just responding to it.
The point I'm trying to make, Mark, is too many of our members do not support sticking with the sequester because of their concerns about the military.
And more. And some of them, you have some weak ones that want more domestic spending, right?
That's true, too.
Okay.
And what I do not want to see is a situation where we have Republicans so worked up about the sequester that they're willing to take spending increases without offsets or even tax increases. I want to prevent that from happening. This agreement prevents that from happening. This agreement makes sure that we don't raise taxes and that we cut more than we spend. You can do the 10-year, I get all that. we have a conference of people who are very worried about the military, and we prevent the military from getting cut further. And I keep our principles intact, which is this is an effort that reduces the deficit versus doing nothing. It protects the military. It doesn't raise taxes. And we reject
Don't be mad at me.
By the Democrats. We reject unemployment.
I'll tell you what. Hold on. Don't hang up. Hold on for 2 more minutes. We'll be right back.
Mark Levin.
You know, Congressman, first of all, thank you for being with us. We don't have a lot of time, and I'm going to give you the last word. But this seems to me, you tell me if I'm right, that we're on the fiscal ship Titanic, and we're debating what's going over at the water cooler in the back there.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. That's why I'm not trying to oversell this. I don't think with this president we are going to fix our fiscal mess. I don't think he is willing and able to do what it takes to do it. Look, we passed a budget 3 years in a row in the House to balance the budget, pay off the debt. The president has never proposed a budget that ever balances, let alone pay off the debt. Neither has the Senate. So we're not dealing with governing, a government here that is willing to do that. The premise of your arguments, which are very logical, and you're great at putting me through my paces, that's why I like coming on your show, is that, we could just stick with the sequester. The problem is we have too many members that don't want to or are unwilling to do that because of the military.
But so not just the military, right? Not just
the military. So I am motivated to get an agreement that keeps Republican principles intact, which is reduce the deficit without raising taxes. And that's where we are, and that's why I think this is a step in the right direction. And I think it also advances some of our other goals, which is keep speaking truth to power, don't shut the government down and distract from this train wreck of Obamacare that's right before us.
I've got to go. No offense. Thank you, Congressman, for coming on. I think we gave you a good amount of time. I don't think that the liberals are going to hold to a $23 billion cut over 10 years, or any cut over 10 years for that matter. Proof is in the pudding. But there you have it. I'll be right back.
WBAP.